It was raining so hard the wind felt like it had teeth. I was standing barefoot on the porch, watching Mom dig through her purse for her work badge with one hand, umbrella barely holding up in the other. "You're gonna catch cold, baby," she said, not even looking at me. "Get back inside. Come on." I didn't move. My name's Travis. I was 12 years old, living in Fargo, North Dakota. That night was the last time I ever saw my mom. She finally looked up and smiled, that tired kind of smile she wore too often. "Tell you what, tomorrow morning, I'll make those mashed potato cakes. The crispy ones with the little green onions, remember?" I nodded. I never liked school breakfast, but those cakes, they were her way of making everything okay, especially after Dad yelled or slammed cabinets all night, like he had the night before. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. I'd sit by myself in the kitchen, chewing through dry spaghetti or boiled hot dogs, watching that stained wall clock tick like it was trying to outlive me. I started talking to the empty chair across from me. "You'd burn the ends on purpose, remember?" I'd whisper. Said it gave 'em crunch. Nobody answered. There were no more fairy tales, no more warm towels out of the dryer, no more humming while she cleaned. Just silence, the kind that wraps around your throat and pulls. He stopped calling me by my name too. I was just kid now, not Travis, like that word had died with her. The mashed potato cakes, never saw them again, but I remembered every bite. I'd lie awake, stomach aching, picturing her flipping them on the stove, brow shiny with sweat, humming some Dolly Parton song under her breath. 2 years passed like that, just gray days stacking up like dirty plates. Then one day, Dad came home with a woman I didn't recognize. She had bright red nails, a fake smile, and 2 teenagers in tow, a girl with thick eyeliner and a boy who kept chewing gum like it owed him something. Sharon, that was her name. She didn't look at me much. When she did, it was like she was checking to see if I was house-trained. They didn't move in slowly. One weekend, the furniture changed, the walls got new pictures, and my mom's coat disappeared from the hallway rack. I found it stuffed in a garbage bag in the garage. I took it back to my room and hid it under my mattress. Sharon didn't hit me, didn't yell either, but she had this way of asking me things like I didn't live there. "Travis, can you not leave your shoes there? Travis, can you eat in your room tonight? We're having a family movie." I was 12, then 13, then 14. Still, the kid. The new boy, Blake, took over my spot at the dinner table. Sharon made his plate first, gave him the biggest scoop of mashed potatoes like that somehow belonged to him now. Then, one Thursday night, Dad called me into the living room. He didn't even look up from the TV. "Hey kid," he said, like he was ordering fries. "You're gonna stay with your grandpa for a bit." I stood there, arms limp at my sides. "Why?" "It's just for a while. Sharon's sister's coming to stay. Place is gonna be full." He said it like I should be grateful. "You're sending me away," I said. He shrugged. "He's your blood too." I wanted to say 1,000 things, but none of them mattered. I packed that night, one duffel bag, the coat, and the shawl. Nobody helped. Nobody said goodbye. Next morning, I watched the house from the back seat of a rideshare, knowing I wasn't coming back. He didn't even come out to see me off, just stood in the garage doorway, arms crossed, like he was waiting for the trash to be picked up. The car dropped me off in front of a sagging one-story house that looked like it was trying to collapse in on itself. Paint peeling, porch light flickering, grass dead. That was my Grandpa Howard's place. He opened the door before I could knock. White beard gone yellow at the edges, eyes bloodshot. Wearing a t-shirt with holes and no pants, just boxers. A bottle dangled from his hand like it was part of him. "You're Kenneth's boy?" he asked, voice raspy and cold. "Yes, sir," he sniffed. "You can call me Grandpa, but don't expect me to act like one." Then he turned and shuffled back inside. The smell hit me before I even crossed the threshold. Rotting food, old smoke, and a thick layer of stale liquor that clung to everything. Bottles lined the windowsills like trophies. The floor stuck under my shoes. "Bedroom's down the hall," he muttered. "Don't touch my stuff." The room had no sheets, just a thin mattress that smelled like mildew. I set my duffel down, tried to tell myself it was temporary. Maybe if I helped around, cleaned up, cooked meals, maybe he'd warm up. Next morning, I swept the kitchen, scrubbed plates, even fixed a loose cabinet door. He came. If I spilled a drop, he'd throw the bottle at the wall. Sometimes he'd start shouting about my father, calling him a coward, saying I had the same weak face. Other times, he'd talk to himself like I wasn't even there. Food was scarce. Some nights I'd steal peanut butter from the jar and eat it with my fingers, crouched near the sink so he wouldn't see. Sleep wasn't much better. He'd stumble into my room at random hours, kick the bed frame, demand I get up and fetch him another bottle. Once I didn't move fast enough. He slammed my head against the wall so hard the drywall cracked. Nobody came. The neighbors saw me taking out trash, walking to the store for more liquor, face bruised and thin. But nobody said a word. After a while, my body just went numb. The beatings, the insults, the hunger, it all blended into a single blur of surviving. One night, he passed out on the couch with a bottle of bourbon halfway full. I sat beside him, staring at the label. Something about the smell, oak, vanilla, smoke, pulled at me. I lifted the bottle, sniffed again. That's when I realized I could tell exactly what was in it. The sweetness, the bitterness, even the kind of wood used in the barrel. I didn't know how, but I could feel it in my tongue, like music notes in a chord. It became my secret. Whenever he wasn't looking, I'd sniff his bottles, sip tiny drops, write down what I noticed in an old notebook I found in a drawer. Hints of caramel, spice, burnt sugar, I'd scribble. It gave me something that was mine. He thought he was teaching me to be worthless, but really, he was giving me the only thing that ever made sense. By the end of those 3 years, I wasn't the same kid who arrived with hope. I was quieter, sharper. My hands shook sometimes, but my mind stayed clear. Every night, I hid the notebook under the mattress and whispered to myself, "One day, this will matter." I didn't know how yet, but it was the only promise I had left to keep. The last punch landed square in the ribs. I felt something shift, maybe crack. He was too drunk to notice, or care. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he slurred, stumbling backward. I didn't answer. I was already on the floor, blood in my mouth, one arm wrapped around my notebook. By midnight, the storm had rolled in hard. Thunder cracked like it was breaking the sky in half. I waited until his snores were steady, then grabbed my bag. Just one thing inside. The notebook. I wrapped Mom's shawl around it, shoved it under my shirt, and slipped out the back door barefoot. Didn't take a last look. Didn't need to. The rain hit like ice. The wind stung my face raw, but every step felt like peeling off chains. I didn't know where I was going, just that I wasn't coming back. I made it to a gas station on the edge of town by sunrise, sat behind the dumpsters, soaked to the bone, knees to my chest, pretending the shawl was still warm. That was my first night free. It was brutal, but it was mine. I stuck my thumb out on the side of Highway 10 until a guy in a rusty pickup rolled down his window and said, "You runnin' or just dumb?" I said, "Both," and climbed in. He dropped me off outside Moorhead. After that, I walked, block after block, looking for a sign, a break, a chance. I asked for work at a corner store. The guy told me to get lost. I asked at a mechanic's shop. They laughed. I slept on a bench behind a library, using the shawl as a pillow. I ate crackers from a trash bag behind a bakery. My stomach hurt constantly. My hands shook when I stood too fast. But every time I thought about going back, I remembered his breath on my face, the sting of belt leather, the glass in my foot. I'd rather starve. A few days later, I walked into this rundown diner called Joe's Place. Smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. A guy behind the counter, mid-50s, heavy arms, cigarette tucked behind one ear, looked up at me. "You lost?" he asked. I said, "No, I need work, anything. I'll clean toilets." He stared for a second, then nodded toward the kitchen. "You wash dishes, don't talk back, don't steal. I'll pay you cash nightly. You screw me, you're gone." That was it. That's how I met Joe. I worked 12-hour shifts, hands raw from hot water and steel wool. I didn't complain. I didn't speak unless spoken to. Joe never asked questions, but he always made sure I ate. At night, I found a tiny room in a beat-up boarding house. No lock, no heater, but it was dry and mine. I kept the notebook under the mattress, just like before. Still filled it every night. Notes about tastes, smells, how each bottle made me feel. I still dreamed of Mom sometimes, her voice telling stories, her cake sizzling in the pan. The shawl stayed folded on the pillow beside me. I didn't know what was coming next. but I knew I was done surviving for someone else. Now, I was surviving for me. My back was sore, and my fingers were cracked from scrubbing pans all day. I was drying my hands on a rag behind the kitchen door when I heard her voice. "Double rye, neat," the waitress said to the bartender, spinning her order slip. But I knew that bottle. She pointed at a label that said rye, but it was corn heavy, a blended mess trying to pass itself off as something better. I stepped out before I even realized what I was doing. "That's not rye," I said. "At least not more than 51%. It's cut with neutral grain and sweetened up for tourists." She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Joe, standing behind the register, turned his full body toward me. "What did you just say?" I swallowed, dried my hands again, even though they were already dry. "If you want a real rye, use the Wilford's bottle on the third shelf. Spicier, drier, actual character." Joe walked over, grabbed both bottles, popped the tops, sniffed them. Then he poured a shot of each and handed them to the waitress. "Let her decide," he said. She came back 2 minutes later and said the customer wanted the second one, the Wilfords. Joe didn't say a word, but the next night, he told me to wear a clean shirt and meet him behind the bar at 6. "You screw this up," he said. "You're back on dishes forever." I didn't screw it up. At first, he let me just line up bottles, rinse glasses, prep garnishes. But people started noticing I wasn't just guessing. I could smell a pour and name the cask type, region, even the yeast strain if it was strong enough. "You got a weird little gift," Joe said one night, watching me mix a custom pour for a guy from Chicago. Like one of those freak kids on daytime TV. Didn't feel like a gift to me, just felt like survival that finally had a purpose. Then came Fargo rain. I was closing one night, rain slamming the windows, same kind of storm as the night I left Howard's. That memory clawed through me hard. So I grabbed 4 bottles, Scotch, Amaro, orange bitters, and an aged rye. And I started experimenting, tasting, balancing. I mixed in a dash of lemon peel, crushed ice, stirred it slow. Took one sip and felt like I was standing behind that gas station again, cold and wild-eyed, finally free. I called it Fargo Rain, put it on the chalkboard the next day. Didn't say much, just let it sit. By Friday, people were asking for it by name. Joe took one sip, nodded, and never questioned it. Then this older guy in a blazer shows up. Soft-spoken, clean shoes, drinking solo. I clocked him as a critic. You can always tell. He asked for a pour of Gold Bell Reserve, said he heard we carried the real stuff. I pulled the bottle, popped the cork, and paused. Something was off. Smelled like a cheaper blend trying to fake its way into the lineup. "This isn't Bell," I said. "Label's real, but the juice isn't." Joe walked over. "You sure?" I poured a sample, handed it to him. He sniffed, frowned, swirled. "Well, I'll be darned," he said. "You're right." The critic watched the whole thing, didn't say a word, just scribbled something down. A week later, we were in the local paper. "Teen bartender with a whiskey nose like a bloodhound." That's when Joe made it official, gave me the bar. I was 17, technically not even allowed to drink, but nobody cared, not when I could outsell every other pour in the county. Every night, I poured drinks like they were stories, telling people about each barrel, each bottle. My hands stopped shaking. I slept better, started saving money. Every tip went into a jar labeled "Someday." Bought books on brewing, chemistry, distilling. Joe found me reading one night during break and tossed a coffee at my chest. "You're gonna open your own place, huh?" I shrugged. "Maybe. You should. Just don't name it after yourself. That name ain't worth shit yet." I laughed. "Yeah, I know. But I had a name in mind already. And it wasn't mine. At 19, with my pockets barely filled and my mind locked on one thing, I opened the doors to Scarf. The place was small, barely more than a little room. Black painted walls, vintage lights, a bar that looked like it had seen better days, but it was mine. I named it after her, after my mom, the woman who wore that old shawl every winter and made me feel like home was possible. The first week, no one came. I'd clean the glasses, set the bar, and stare at the clock. 7 o'clock, no one. 8 o'clock, nothing. 9 o'clock. Silence except for the hum of the fridge in the back. I didn't care. I worked on my drinks, perfecting every pour, every ounce of the story behind it. Each drink became a piece of her, a piece of me. I'd tell customers, This one's called the mashed potato cake. It's got bourbon, a hint of cinnamon, some burnt sugar, the same flavor I used to chase down when Mom made those cakes in the kitchen. I told them about the night I left, about the storm, about the rain that tasted like freedom. At first, nobody cared. It was just a drink, but I kept at it. I poured everything into those cocktails like they were chapters of a book no one had ever read. Then Joe stopped by. He came in one night, nodded at the empty seats, and shook his head. "What the hell's going on here?" "Not much," I said. "But it's mine." He grinned. "That's the spirit, kid." He dropped a bag of limes on the counter. "You need connections. You need people to know you can pour more than a drink. You need them to believe you're telling a story." It wasn't overnight, but things started to pick up. Word spread about the Fargo rain, the mashed potato cake, and the new place that served drinks with stories. Then came Lucy. She used to work with me at Joe's, back when I was scrubbing dishes, and now she was a regular. She'd sit at the bar, order something simple, and smile every time I served her. I could tell she was watching me, maybe sizing me up, but she never pushed. One night, she leaned over the counter, her fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey. "You know, you're gonna make it?" I stared at her, eyebrows raised. "You think so?" She nodded. "You don't just know whiskey, you get it. It's about stories. People want more than just a drink. They want to feel something when they're here." She was right. Slowly I started pouring with more purpose, telling stories that felt real, not rehearsed. Each drink had a thread of my history, of what I went through, of what I wanted to build. And then, one night, a guy named Benjamin Shaw walked in. Well-dressed, sharp suit, looked like he had money to spare. He asked for a scarf, the house special. I served it, of course, with a story about how the drink was inspired by a storm and a kid with nothing but a notebook and a scarf. He took a sip, slowly, nodding to himself. "Impressive," he said. "You've got something here." I shrugged, wiping down the counter. "It's just a drink." He raised his eyebrows. "No, it's more than that. You've got a gift, kid, and I want to back you, not just the bar, a distillery. You're serious about this, right?" The offer was everything I thought I wanted, but I knew I couldn't take it for the money. I wasn't looking to make a fortune. I wanted something that meant more. I looked him in the eye and said, "I'll take your offer, but only if it's not just about the money. I want to make something real." He smiled. "That's exactly why I'm here." From that point on, things changed. I wasn't just the guy behind the bar anymore. I had a future, and it wasn't just about surviving. It was about building something bigger than myself, something worth remembering. Every night after closing, I'd sit in the back with my notebook, sketching out ideas. What kind of whiskey? How could I make it different? What flavors would tell my story? The dream was real now, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. With Benjamin's backing, things moved fast. One minute, I was slinging drinks at Scarf. The next, I was standing in front of a distillery. Not a huge place, but it had everything I needed. Copper stills, oak barrels, a room to breathe. We started small, but every drop of whiskey we made felt like a piece of me. It wasn't just about alcohol anymore. It was about preserving memories. I named the first batch Fargo Rain because it felt right. It wasn't the strongest whiskey I'd ever tasted, but it was real. It had weight. I could taste the weather, the grit, the escape in it. Word got out fast. People in the industry started noticing. Tastings, reviews, whispers of something new on the horizon. Before I knew it, Scarf whiskey was being talked about in circles I used to read about in magazines, not in my wildest dreams. I wasn't just a guy behind a bar anymore. I was a name. That's when I met Teresa. She wasn't anything like I expected. Benjamin's daughter, sure, but nothing like him. She was soft-spoken but sharp, warm in a way I hadn't experienced in years. We met at one of those high-end tastings Benjamin invited me to. She walked into the room like she belonged there, with a smile that had nothing to do with money or status. "Travis," she said, offering her hand. "I've heard about you." I didn't know what to say. Most people who knew me were talking about the whiskey, the brand, the business, not me. "I hope it's good things," I said, only half joking. She laughed, her eyes lighting up. "Mostly good things," she said. "But you're here now. Let's see for ourselves." We talked for hours that night. I don't know what I said, but it felt easy. Like there was no weight in the air, no old ghosts hanging around. I'd never met anyone who asked about my past like she did. Not out of pity, but out of curiosity, like she wanted to understand the person I'd become. We saw each other more often after that. Sometimes she'd visit the distillery, sometimes I'd meet her for dinner. I didn't know how to explain it, but I began to look forward to the quiet moments, those slow conversations where I didn't have to hide anything. Eventually, Benjamin pulled me aside. We were sitting in his office after a long day of planning our next big release. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms, and said, "You're already family, you know that, right?" I didn't know how to answer that. There was something in his voice that made me feel like maybe I had a place. "You've done well," he said. "Now it's time to take the next step. Don't wait too long, Travis. You and Teresa, you're a good fit." I didn't know if he meant business or life, but I heard both. A few months later, Teresa and I were standing in front of a crowd, exchanging vows. I looked out over the room at all the people who'd watched me stumble through the mess of my life and had never turned away. My hands were shaking, but I kept telling myself it was because of the nerves, not because of the emptiness. The wedding was grand, the kind of event people talked about for weeks. But in the middle of it, when I saw Teresa's family smiling at us, when I saw the life they'd built together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still missing something. Something big. Mom's absence was like a hole in the air. I stood there, holding Teresa's hand, knowing I was supposed to be happy. But the first thought in my mind wasn't about the vows or the people. It was about the quiet house in Fargo, the smell of mashed potatoes, the rain on the night I left. I didn't cry, I didn't let myself, but I felt it all. The loss, the history I couldn't change. And yet, there was something new too. Something I'd built, something that was mine, that Teresa and I had created together. Maybe it wasn't the same as the family I'd lost, but it was real. I couldn't let myself forget where I'd come from, but for the first time, I was starting to believe maybe I could build something worth keeping. The call came late on a Tuesday, just as I was sitting down to dinner with Teresa. I saw the name Howard flash across my phone, and something in my gut tightened. "He's dead," I said before even picking up. Teresa froze. "Your grandfather?" I nodded, though I hadn't thought of Howard in years. "Guess so." I hung up without saying much more. What could I say? It wasn't grief that hit me. It was this emptiness, like something had been carved out of me without me even realizing it was there. Teresa looked at me, her hand gently touching mine. "You need to go back. For yourself. Not for him. For you, Travis." I didn't answer right away. I didn't know if I could go back to that town, that broken house. But I couldn't ignore the pull either. The next morning, we drove there together. The town hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same gray sky. It all felt too small for the weight I was carrying. I made the arrangements for Howard's funeral. A proper one, the kind he never deserved. Oak coffin, white flowers, country music in the background. It wasn't for him. It was for me. For the part of me that needed closure. When I picked out the flowers, the florist gave me a strange look. "You sure you're here for the right person?" she asked. I nodded, but I couldn't say what I needed to say. Nobody understood. I barely did myself. The service was held at the small church down the street from the house. The neighbors gathered, their faces a mix of surprise and confusion. They hadn't expected dignity from the son of the man they all knew as a drunk. But here we were. They were quiet, respectful, but I could feel them watching me, waiting for a crack. Afterward, I went back to the house, the place I'd left so many years ago. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I ended up in the living room, staring at a picture of my grandparents. They were younger then, smiling over some furniture they'd built together, the kind of image that might have looked like happiness if you didn't know what came after. I stood there for what felt like hours, studying their faces, trying to fit them into the picture I'd carried with me all these years. I wasn't sure if they were strangers, or if I had been the stranger all along. The service ended, and I took a deep breath, a real one. Not out of forgiveness, but out of something that felt more like release. "I don't have to keep holding on to this," I said, more to myself than anyone else. Teresa stood beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. "No, you don't." We didn't stay long. There was nothing else to say, nothing else to feel. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to hold me down. As we drove back to the city, I could still see Howard's house in the rearview mirror, a faded silhouette. But it didn't feel like my burden anymore. It was snowing hard when they knocked. I'd been on the couch, watching the flakes pile up outside, letting my mind wander while I sipped on a glass of scarf. When the knock came, I didn't move at first. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, there they were. My father, Kenneth, and his wife, Sharon. Both dressed up, but it was clear they didn't fit into their own clothes anymore. Kenneth had more gray in his hair than I remembered, his face gaunt, eyes sunken. Sharon looked like she'd put on a little weight, but there was still something desperate about her. For a second, I just stood there, taking them in. Then Kenneth gave me one of those tired smiles he used to pull out when he wanted something. "I'm sorry, Travis," he said, like the words were coming from a mouth he didn't recognize. "I know I haven't been around, but I've been thinking about you. About everything." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, Sharon trailing behind him. She didn't say a word, just looked around, as if taking stock of what I'd built. Kenneth didn't bother to take his coat off, but he sat down like he owned the place. "You've done well for yourself," he said, eyes flicking to the glass of whiskey in my hand. "I see you're doing all right." I didn't answer, but I knew what was coming. He was looking for something, anything. Sharon glanced at the whiskey, then at me. "I bet things are easier with the money you're making now." Kenneth turned to her as if he'd just remembered the reason they were here. Yeah, that's what we came for, Travis. We were hoping, well, things haven't been going too well for us. You know, bills piling up and, well," his voice trailed off. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old stack of bills, shaking his head like the money was heavy. "We're behind. Could use a little help." I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't let it show. I could already hear the desperation in his voice. The same old game. "You want money?" I said, flat, not a question. He shifted in his seat, pretending to be embarrassed, but not enough to stop asking. "Well, yeah, you're doing good, right? And I thought maybe, since you've got connections now, maybe you could help me out too." I didn't explode, I didn't yell or throw them out right then and there. Instead, I walked behind the bar, pulled out the same cheap whiskey he used to pour down my throat, the stuff that tasted like regret and missed chances. I grabbed 5 glasses and poured them all full. "I'll help you," I said, sliding the glasses toward him one by one. "If you really want help." Kenneth looked confused, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed the glass, staring at it for a long second before he took the first sip. He coughed and sputtered, slamming the glass down on the counter. "That's garbage," he muttered, wiping his mouth. "Yeah," I said. "It's the same stuff you used to drink, remember?" He gave me a tight smile, but I could see his hands shaking now, the same way mine used to when I was a kid, desperate for some kind of approval. I didn't say anything more. I just pushed the other glasses toward him, one after another, until all 5 were in front of him. "Drink 'em, all of them, if you want help." His face twisted, but he picked up the second glass. He sipped it, then choked it back, barely able to finish the first one. He couldn't even make it through the second. He put it down hard, his hands trembling, and just looked at me. "I don't need anything from you," I said, my voice low and steady. "Not anymore. I owe you nothing." His eyes hardened, but he didn't argue. Sharon just stood there, looking at me like she was waiting for something. Finally, I spoke again. "Get out." They didn't say a word after that. Sharon grabbed Kenneth's coat and helped him to his feet. They walked out the door without another glance at me. When the door closed behind them, I felt nothing but relief. It wasn't anger or satisfaction. It was something simpler. Something like quiet. Teresa came home a little later. She found me sitting at the bar, staring at the empty glasses in front of me. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice soft but searching. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine." She sat next to me, running her fingers across the counter. "You handled it like a man." "I didn't explode," I said, half laughing. "That's about as close as I'll get." She smiled, her hand finding mine. "You did what you needed to do. You faced him." I leaned back, feeling the weight finally lifting. The past wasn't gone, but it didn't hold me anymore. "Yeah," I said, "I did." The morning after they left, I grabbed my mother's scarf, the same brown wool with the frayed edges. I'd kept it in a drawer for years, but now it felt like the right time to bring it out. I took it to the distillery, to the place that had become more than just business. It had become home, a place where I'd built something from the ground up, where I could finally breathe without being choked by the past. I set up a small memorial corner by the window. The light came in just right at this hour, casting a soft glow over the old photo of her I'd framed. The one where she was smiling, holding me when I was a kid, before everything got hard. I placed the scarf over the edge of the frame and put a plaque beside it. Deborah Scott, the woman who gave me everything. I stood there for a minute, the silence in the distillery somehow feeling heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Teresa came in a few hours later, her smile quiet as she saw what I'd done. She walked over, touching the plaque gently, then looked up at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. It wasn't about being okay. It was about being whole. That night, after everything was done, we sat in the small office, the dim light of the desk lamp casting shadows over our faces. Teresa turned to me, eyes full of curiosity. "What do you think about having kids, Travis?" she asked. I wasn't expecting the question, but I didn't hesitate. "I think they should know the whole story, not just the good parts, all of it." She smiled softly. "They should know about Fargo rain and potato cakes and the strength that came from a woman who gave everything for her son." I looked at her, the idea sinking in. "Yeah," I said, voice thick, "they should. I'll tell them about how one woman's love got me through the worst of it." Later, as the final batch of whiskey was sealed, I poured a glass, my hand steady now, the shaking a distant memory. I raised it toward the corner where the scarf rested, and for the first time in a long time, I whispered, "I did it, Mom." The pain hadn't gone away. It was still there, hiding in the corners, but it didn't control me anymore. I'd turned it into something stronger, something that was mine. As I sipped the whiskey, I felt a quiet peace settle over me, not because the past was gone, but because I had finally found a way to make it work for me.